Hey y'all, it's Becky here in my squeaky chair. And welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, hi, my name is Becky, and every Tuesday and Thursday, did it just start now? Hi, my name is Becky, and I have a squeaky chair. And every Tuesday and Thursday, we talk about the climate here. The problems, yes, but the solutions, yes. So if that sounds like something you would be interested in, go ahead and click that subscribe button below, hit the like, comment, share, all that good stuff. And if you hear a voice from the ether, that is my mom, Sandy. Say hi, Sandy.
Hi.
And she is here because you have found yourself, if you're new here, in the weekly, boom, Climate Book Club. Let me not destroy things. Okay. And so for the Climate Book Club, which takes place at this time every Thursday, we talk about a particular book that relates to the climate movement. And lately we have been reading All We Can Save, Truth, Courage, and Solutions for the Climate Crisis, which is essays and poems written by women in the climate movement, because that is a audience or a group of people that hasn't been as much at the table previously. Now they're looking pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
As it should. And so, yeah. So if you are here, it says 0 people, which means we don't count as one. My answer. I finally got my answer. I don't count as a person.
That's good to know, Becky.
That's good to know. I'm not a person.
I would say you're a person.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. If you don't understand what just happened, just keep going. Okay. So yeah, right now we are really in the middle of the book.
Yes.
We are in the middle. So each section we do for that once a week. And we are doing persist this time, which is this is the pretty picture, as there's a pretty picture in all of them. And it says, "What do we owe to the powerful who lied for decades?" Now, if anyone has been in the climate movement for a millisecond, they probably know who it's being referred to, especially with this picture. I mean, what does it look like? Gas? Oil?
Spilt chocolate milk.
Spilled chocolate milk. That looks gross. Is that chocolate milk? More like burnt coffee.
Yeah, okay, burnt coffee.
And if you see a cat in the back, can you see the cat?
There he is.
There he is. That's my little boy, Rue. He's a co-host. Okay. I totally have not considered to add cat ears to my logo. Anyways, that'd be really cute, right?
Yeah. Make
the earth with cat ears. I think that'd be adorable. I'll think about it. I don't want to scare dog people, so we'll see.
True.
All right. But anyways, let's go ahead and just get right into it. So the first one of the persist section is called We Are Sunrise, and it is by Varshini Prakash. And if you have heard of the sunrise movement, then you could probably guess where she's coming from. Yeah. So she started as a teenager wondering, like, how did people basically, like, how are people okay with not worrying about these issues, which I get. She said, what do people do to each other? She imagines like basically like a future climate world, which, I mean, this is morbid, but it's pretty accurate to like situations that we're going to see in the near future that we're already seeing, which is what people would do to each other when faced with no food, no water, the cages and guns that would greet people seeking sanctuary in other countries, because we're going to see that as the climate continues to warm. So it's a grim image there. And she said, growing up as a short brown girl, I felt that the whole world of politics and elections and the government itself reveled in my exclusion, which I thought was a very powerful sentiment. We are on page 188, if anyone's following along, by the way. Mom, what was I see you have some highlighted parts. What else?
It's just further down. She talks about building a social movement means practicing democracy beyond the realm of elections and political parties in ways that are vibrant and inclusive.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, and she talks about how it only takes 3.5% of the population to get active, and the 3.5 of the population would equate to 11.5 million people. and which is roughly the number of people who live in Ohio. But we can do it. So
that's to win a campaign.
Yeah, that's just to win a campaign.
Which is really cool.
Yeah.
3.5%. I had no idea such a small number could win a campaign.
Yeah, exactly. So
it's encouraging.
There's hope.
Yes.
Which is great. And that was in her first little section where she talks about basically the 3 pillar parts that the Sunrise Movement focuses on when they are looking at making systemic change. The first one is people power, an active and vocal base of public support, which is where she talks about the 3.5%.
Mm-hmm.
The second one is called political power, a critical mass of deeply committed political officials. And she says, we have to make sure that our politicians win or lose based on where they stand on this issue. And I agree. And we start to see that a bit in this most recent presidential election. Somewhat. I mean, the only person that didn't believe in climate change in that election was Trump, and he lost. So, but I don't think that's why he lost.
I don't notice how it distinguished any of the Democratic candidates from
It didn't really. Honestly, I argue that one of the reasons why it didn't differentiate it is because it was such a small piece of the debate topic.
Yeah.
Honestly, I don't think it was prioritized enough. I remember looking at the debates and stuff and being like, oh, good, they're finally going to talk about climate change. And then it was the usual, do you believe in climate change? And do you think something needs to be done about climate change? Just very basic questions. And so there wasn't really much opportunity for them to differentiate themselves within that conversation because it was just trying to get someone in the White House who believed in it.
I think the breakout candidate there was Jay Inslee. Right?
Yes. Yes. He based his campaign on it.
He based his campaign on it, which was totally new, totally different.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I would say the next one in that, well, Bloomberg did that a bit too.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah. And then I'd say the next person that really did that would be Bernie, Elizabeth Warren.
Yes, yeah.
A little bit of Pete Buttigieg. A little bit of Kamala. Not much. Joe Biden a teeny bit. But yeah.
Yeah, but he sure has come out strong.
Yes, he has. And that's partially due to the fact that his administration wrote a part of this section. A member of his administration before she was a member of the administration. And we will get to that later. Stay tuned. So the third part of the Sunrise Movement is the people's alignment, social, economic, and political forces united around a shared agenda. And she says we need a new political alignment in America, a people's alignment that espouses policies and programs derived from values of equity, fairness, and equality, fairness, and safety for all people. Is there a difference between equity and equality? There is, right? That's a different thing. Yes.
I think equity could be applied to a number of subjects like economic equity, but I don't know, equality could too. But equality seems more like, anyway.
They're different words. I think they mean slightly different things. But anyways.
So it's kind of like the New Deal alignment.
It's kind of like the New Deal alignment. And of course, the Sunrise Movement has pushed the Green New Deal, which one of the things is they helped elect Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who's Bay. So obviously one of her main topics was climate change. And one of their main pushing points was the Green New Deal. And so that's really where they...
It's dinner time for the puppy.
Dinner time for the pupper. Okay. And remember, the Sunrise Movement were the same people that basically lied on the ground of Nancy Pelosi's office. And honestly, that is one of my first recognition moments where I was like, this has finally made it to the White House.
Yeah.
That's really where I was like, okay, someone's there, because I really hadn't seen that before. And when I saw it, I was surprised I hadn't seen it earlier, when you think about it, but I'm happy that it happened. Right. So, all right.
And she says that Sunrise then exploded from just 20 local chapters in November 2018 to more than 300 chapters across the country.
Yeah.
So that's a big movement.
You should join them.
Is it mostly youth though? Young
I don't know if
folks?
it's exclusively youth though.
You think they would not be biased against an older person joining?
I mean,
Do you
you're a
think
mom.
but is Bernie a member?
I don't know. I mean, is Senator Ed Markey a member?
Good
Will
question.
AOC get pushed out on her butt when she turns 35? I don't think so.
That's a good question.
I don't know. In 2018, Sunrise endorsed Chloe Mackman. See if they endorsed her. Is she technically part of the Sunrise movement?
Good question.
I don't know. But she ended up getting elected as Maine's House Representative person. And she ran on clean air, water, and energy and turned her rural district blue. And now she has moved to have basically Maine pass their own Green New Deal, boldly committing the state to 80% renewable energy by 2040. I'm going to keep an eye on that.
Yeah, no
That's
kidding.
10 years. Wait, no, 20 years.
Yeah. 19.
I'd say it's a long time, but I don't know. Time moves faster when you're an adult.
Mm-hmm.
And the author, who I'm going to double check her name again, Varshini says that we're working to make the necessary climate action politically possible and then turn the politically possible into the politically inevitable. And I just liked that.
Yeah.
She also said, for so long, climate action has been framed as taking something away from people.
Mm-hmm.
The Green New Deal is about the opposite, providing people with millions of good jobs and reinvigorating our economy and putting money back in the hands of the working people.
Yep.
She says, too often, people talk about the climate crisis like it's something middle and working class people need to bear the financial brunt of, when 100 fossil fuel producers are the source of more than 70% of emissions since 1988. So that's another thing, is I think a lot of people looking on the outside of the Green New Deal, they're like, oh, it's just something that, working class people, or climate change in general, working class people are going to be the ones that have to pay the cost,
Mm-hmm.
with higher taxes and all that kind of stuff. But here she is saying like, hey, no, we recognize that it's not your guys' fault. It's actually the fault of the 100 fossil fuel industries.
Yeah.
Like, we know that. And so it's a reassurance that it's not just meant to punish certain working class people. Working white Americans are not necessarily going to be punished by this, And then she said a July 2019 poll that showed over 63% of Americans supported the Green New Deal, which I didn't know it was that high.
No, I didn't either.
When you break it down, the support was 86% Democrats, 64% independents, 55% rural voters, and 40% of the white evangelical Christians. It's interesting how she split that up.
Mm-hmm.
For young people ages 18 to 38, it's 77%. The Green New Deal could actually be a winning vision for America. So, yeah. I mean, I have been honest about my opinions. I agree, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
I know it's a contentious point for a lot of people in the environmental movement, but something drastic needs to be done. So It's not like, and we'll get more into that idea later. All right. So then there is a quote from Senator Elizabeth Warren, and she said, choose to fight only righteous fights, because then when things get tough, and they will, you will know that there is one option ahead of you. Nevertheless, you must persist. Next one is called At the Intersections by Jackie Patterson. So she first talks about how her dad was from Jamaica. And so she would go and visit Jamaica and listen to reggae music and like chill on the beach and stuff. And she noticed that white tourists were like taking pictures of her and her brother just dancing on the beach. And that implied that they thought that her and her brother were natives, and therefore also implied that tourists have the right to take pictures of native people.
I don't know.
Which is fair. Like, I never thought about it that way. I'm sure I've taken pictures of random ass people. Like, you know, like I'm sure I have like on tourist trips or whatever, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know, like maybe they thought they were performing for money or something. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like I don't. But she said that exposure to racism in subtle, overt, and systemic ways has been a constant thread throughout her life. Jamaica has a lot of social vulnerabilities heaped on top of environmental vulnerabilities, and I honestly don't know very much about Jamaica at all. Wealth inequality, historically high rates of unemployment and debt, and the second highest murder rate in the world are added to natural hazards such as hurricanes, earthquakes, floods, droughts, and fires, creating a chronic crisis for the island. That's insane. Like, that's just a lot for one island. Plus, I'm sure they also have island fever because I'm sure everyone from islands probably do at some point. So that's just a lot of things on top of each other. So she took a really interesting path. She started by teaching getting a degree in special education. And then once she saw the connection between other issues and like climate change, then she ended up getting a master's degree in social work and wrote her thesis on the role of race in the high incidence of infant mortality in African American women. And that formed the Baltimore Fetal Infant Mortality Review. And they found that where you live is a powerful indicator of health and well-being due to social, economic, and environmental factors such as air pollution. Place matters. And then she went to work for the IMA World Health in sub-Saharan Africa. She kept jumping around from the U.S. to parts of Africa and in like and in Jamaica. And she worked with people to deal with the HIV and AIDS epidemic going on over there.
She's seen a lot of
she has seen a lot. She has seen a lot. She said, I quickly became to understand why healthcare activists referred to many in the pharmaceutical company as genocidally evil. Because she found that pharmaceutical companies were forcing them to pay for the more expensive drugs instead of the cheaper drugs made by a different company. So then she went to go back to Louisiana, where she is from. Or, is that right? No. Houston. Sorry, Texas. Wait.
She was working disaster recovery center.
She was working at a disaster recovery center in Houston during Katrina, and she ended up seeing more racist shit. Honestly, for example, an DRC worker who was a white returned Peace Corps volunteer announced that based on his experience working in Nigeria, half the folks coming into the center were likely to commit fraud. That's just racist. That's just racist because she was in an area that was predominantly people of color, and she was one of the only people of color working in that crisis center. And so she said the Black people seeking to go back to New Orleans. Oh yeah, then she heard about Black people seeking to go back to New Orleans and search for food, and possibly stranded relatives were being shot in Dizanger Bridge. Has anyone heard of that? I've never heard of that. Hi, Sarah.
Bridge. Yeah, I haven't heard of that either.
I hadn't heard of that, but that's insane. Like, they were probably like, no, you can't be here. Like, it's not safe. And then people tried to keep coming anyways, and their solution was to kill the people, which is ironic because you're supposed to be keeping them safe. I don't know either. And then she went to continue working on international work. And she was trying to, she found that many women in the international cases that she worked with were asking for female condoms because as a result of climate change, this is insane to me, but as a result of climate change drying up waterways, girls have to walk farther to get the water needed for their daily households because in many communities, women are the ones that have to get the water. The likelihood of sexual assault is so extreme It is better for the girls to wear condoms whenever they go to fetch water. A woman who left her native land of Cameroon because crops dried up in her community was raped at a border crossing and became HIV positive as a result. And so it just really shows that there is quite an intersection between violence against women and climate change. Like, women are going to be more susceptible to violence, sexual violence, because of climate change. She also saw in the center that she had worked at in Houston, a woman who was raped in the aftermath in the chaos of Hurricane Katrina.
Mm-hmm.
Like, just ridiculous. She says that justice is not possible in a capitalist society predicated on there being winners and losers. And now that is coming from the senior director of NCAA Environmental and Climate Justice Program, because I don't know if she does that now, but she did that when she was writing this.
Yeah.
She probably still does that because this is in 2020. By the way, Sarah and the other person here, if you have anything that you would like to add to the discussion, that is what the live chat is for. Please feel free to. Anything that strikes your interest. Yeah. Okay. So she says that the most polluting coal plants are disproportionately located in communities where residents are predominantly low income and people of color. Burning fossil fuels is resulting in sea level rise, which is displacing communities from Kilovina Island, Alaska, to Isle of Jean Charles, Louisiana, shifting rainfall patterns and extreme weather, disrupting agriculture, deepening existing food insecurity in too many communities. Climate change is absolutely a civil rights issue. And she says our communities are often criminalized when prison labor is used. Oh yeah, so she was saying, like, hey, our like Black people are being way often criminalized, and then when they're in prison labor, they're used to fight increasingly frequent and dangerous wildfires. It's like, we're not causing this, and we have to deal with it. Yeah. And she talked about the cold-blooded report, which was done by the NAACP, which basically looked at where coal-fired power plants were relative to communities of color and low-income communities. And she found that the ones that she lived around got an F rating because they lived around a lot of communities of color. Coal-fired power plants spew carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide, and nitrogen dioxide, all greenhouse gases, as well as mercury, arsenic, lead, and particulates. This pollution is tied to everything from respiratory illnesses and birth defects to learning disabilities, attention problems, and violence. She follows that up by saying, have asthma-related absences combined with attention problems put kids in Chicago on a path to the school-to-prison pipeline?
That's a really good question.
Very good question. Is continuing to burn cheap, dirty coal in pursuit for profit responsible for record-breaking heat wave of 1995, which killed 739 of my neighbors?
Mm.
And she said, instead, we need a black to green pipeline, which is renewable energy and just emerging possibilities.
Yeah.
And finally, the last part that I had highlighted in here is communities must uphold a vision of the desired future. And so that is, again, continuing to emphasize the need for community-based action to exemplify what can be done everywhere else.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's that section.
She went through a lot of very tough situations.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Okay, the next one's a poem.
This poem.
I loved this poem too. It confuses me, but I love it.
It confuses me.
Do you know what the problem is? Have you figured out what the problem is?
Well, I thought the problem was climate change.
Maybe.
It's not?
I think maybe, but some of the things didn't quite fit right to me, but I don't know. Okay, so this problem, and I also love the title, it's called, Did It Ever Occur to You That Maybe You're Falling in Love? By Alish Hopper. Or Alish? Alish? All right. We buried the problem. We planted a tree over the problem. We regretted our actions towards the problem. We declined to comment on the problem. We carved a memorial to the problem, dedicated it, forgot our handkerchief. We removed all unnatural ingredients, handcrafted a locally grown tincture for the problem, but nobody bought it. We freshly laundered, bleached, deodorized the problem. We built a wall around the problem, tagged it with pictures of children, birds, and trees. We renamed the problem and denounced those who used the old name. We wrote a law for the problem, but it died in committee. We drove the problem out with loud noises from homemade instruments. We marched, leafleted, sang hymns, linked arms with the problem, got dragged to jail, got spat on by the problem, and let out. We elected an official who finally gets the problem. We raised an army to corral and question the problem. They went door to door, but never ID'd. We made www.problem.com so you can find out about the problem at www.problem.org. Thank you. So you can help. We created 1-800-problem so you could report on the problem, and 1-900-problem so you could be the only daddy that really turns that problem on. We drove the wheels off of that problem. We rocked the shit out of that problem. We amplified the problem, turned it on up, and blew it out. We drank to forget the problem. We inhaled the problem, exhaled the problem, crushed its embers under our shoe. We put a title on the problem, took out all the articles, conjunctions, and verbs, called it experimental problem. But it has like no vowels, right? Okay. We shot the problem and put it out of its misery. We swallowed daily pills for the problem, followed a problem fast, drank problem tea. We read daily problem horoscopes, had our problem palms read by a seer. We prayed, burned problem incense, formed a problem task force, got a problem degree, got a problem 10-year track, got a problem retirement plan. We gutted and innovated and renovated the problem. We joined the Neighborhood Problem Development Corps. We listened and communicated with the problem only to find out that it had gone for the day. We mutually empowered the problem. We kissed and stroked the problem. We fucked the problem all night, woke up to an empty bed. We watched carefully for the problem, but our flashlight died. We had dreams of the problem in which we could no longer recognize ourselves. We reformed, we transformed, turned over a new leaf, turned a corner, found ourselves near a scent that somehow reminded us of the problem in ways we could never put into words. That little I can't explain, that makes it hard to think, that rings like a siren inside. It's interesting at the end she stops saying problem.
Yeah.
Did it go away? Did the last thing work? Oh, we reformed and transformed. That's what solved the problem.
Oh.
That's my guess. Yes. Sorry, 1 second. No problem. No problem.
So that is interesting. We reformed, we transformed, turned over a new leaf.
Smells like the problem. But yeah. So I don't know. Let me know what you guys think.
What is the problem?
I guess you're right. The problem, well, I think it's multiple things because maybe it's the causers of climate change are the problem. That's why when she was talking about like we drove our wheels off the problem, like that could be a car, right? We created be the only daddy that really turns that problem on, like maybe that refers to like executives. I don't know, like
it's like they did everything they could possibly think of to get rid of the problem.
Yeah, I love that we created problem degrees, problem 10-year track, a problem retirement plan. That's really funny.
Yeah, so good poem.
Yeah, it's a very good poem.
And it's followed by
Dear Fossil Fuel Executives by Cameron Russell. If you don't know Cameron Russell, Google her. She is a supermodel. I don't know if she's super, but she's a model. I think she's a super. I don't know. Dear Exxon Mobil, Shell, BP, and Chevron executives. Dear Chairman of the Boards. Dear Jamie Dimon and the Board of Directors at JP Morgan Chase. Dear fossil fuel corporate leadership and investors everywhere. That's how it starts. And she basically compares the fossil fuel industry to the fashion industry, which is really interesting because she's in the fashion industry. She recognizes that there's problems. Yeah, there she is. See that? She's cute. So she compares that they both have problematic aspects, like they're built on problems. And she did it in a way to kind of like humanize executive mobiles a little bit.
Well,
but also hold them accountable.
Yeah, she's like, I feel your pain. Gosh, I'm kind of in the same situation.
Yeah.
And then she's saying how terrible she feels and what she's trying to do about it. And she's kind of like, well, and you must be feeling the same way.
Yeah.
It's very clever.
Yeah. Some of the facts that she threw out. Fashion's carbon footprint is big and growing, responsible for 8 to 10% of global emissions. 3/5 of all clothes end up in the landfill or incinerator within a few years of being produced. Not
That's
mine.
amazing.
Mine don't.
No.
I don't know how people give up clothes that fast. Jeez. 3/5 of all clothes end up in a landfill or incinerator within I already read that. By some estimates, textile production is on track to use at least a quarter of the world's carbon budget by 2050.
Crazy.
Yeah. And then she talks about the Bangladeshi garment factory collapsing in 2013, which I remember that. It killed 1,134 people and injured 2,500 others. And she remembers looking at that thinking, wow, I'm part of the responsible industry.
That's right.
But I nor the executives of the industry were held responsible. Instead, it was just the people on the front line, like the owners of the factory itself. And she said that Amazon, which has surpassed Walmart as the biggest clothing retailer in the United States, was selling garments from dozens of blacklisted, unsafe, but Benghazi factories. Bangladeshi. Why do I? That's not the same thing. And that was 6 years after that, so 2019.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. There's Amazon.
See, but she has these statements in here. Maybe you can't relate to what I do for a living, but I believe you may understand the horror I felt that day in 2013.
Yeah. And then she gives them plenty of examples to relive their horror.
Yes.
Such as the Exxon Valdez oil spill of 1989, or the Deepwater Horizon oil spill of 2010, or the, let's see, what else? The 2013 Typhoon Haiyan. Yes, Rue.
Come on in, Rue.
I think we can leave the door open now. Yeah. So then she says that when you let those truths in, do you ever wonder quietly, desperately, what can I do? Despite our different life paths, perhaps we have this in common. She says that 80% of the workforce are women and women of color, and they don't make a living wage. So it's also a women's issue. And she said direct and indirect subsidies exceed annual spending by the Pentagon, propping up the profitability of oil, gas, and coal. It is enormously difficult to incorporate long-term thinking when short-term dominates boardroom strategy as the market encourages quarterly growth above all else. She says Black Americans are 75% more likely than whites to live in fence-lined communities next to commercial facilities. And I liked this part that she says, not ignorant. The more I learned about my industry, the worse I felt. In fact, I stopped working there for a while. Have you done that? It's a privileged response to despair. I think we often allow ourselves to be ignorant, not ignorant of the issues. You know where this leads, and maybe you'll ogle the bunkers of billionaires or have built your own, but ignorant of another way forward. So that's interesting. It's not that they're ignorant of the problem. They're just ignorant of an alternative way forward, which I've never thought about it.
Possibly by choice.
Possibly by choice. Yeah. And she talks about Threads Up, which if you guys don't know Threads Up is bae. It is the largest online thrift store in the world. And I'm sorry, it's only for girls. They need to do a boy line. They have kids and they have women and they have accessories. But yeah, so highly recommend it. Basically, like, as a woman, you don't need to shop anywhere else. You can get all your brands from there. Like, seriously, it's everywhere. Even we looked for my grandma's favorite brand and it was there, so it allows you to look at some old fashions too. So you can choose your own fashion season. And there's always discounts. It's discounted price. So yeah, that's my little spiel. I haven't heard of Fiber Shed in California, but I was curious about that. I want to look at that because it farms regeneratively to produce fiber for garment. Okay, thanks for sharing. And then she talks about the Native Renewables, which is an example that brings affordable off-grid solar energy to 15,000 Navajo and Hopi homes in Arizona. And reminds us that American and Alaskan Native tribes have a higher rate of homes without electricity in the United States, which is insane. I didn't know that. Yeah. I'm not surprised, to be honest, but I did know that. I think that's partially probably because, when they split up the land and gave some to Native peoples, and they just were like, oh, well, you can figure out your own electricity, right?
Yeah, because you're a different nation.
Yeah.
However, you should know that part of the $1.9 trillion, there's a section of that funding set aside for Indigenous people to do with what they need to do with.
Yeah, absolutely. So. And to respond to that comment a little more, if you find the future of our world boring as hell, then I can't help you. Okay, just need to get that off my chest. So she says that if some of the least resourced communities are finding ways to build a just and sustainable future, then certainly fossil fuel companies with their vast power and resources can find a way to transform with fairness to the people they employ. Once again, she's very eloquently spoken.
Yeah.
And this part killed me. Since the Paris Agreement, banks around the world, and JP Morgan is the worst, have invested $1.9 trillion in fossil fuels, growing gas and oil industries. Yeah, we need to switch banks. Simply put, there can be no longer companies that extract or profit off fossil fuels. Transition looks like shifting investments, retiring infrastructure, and retraining workforces. She says most big industries rely on the same level of extraction and continue to grow their profits. And so that's both the fashion industry and fossil fuel industry. In fashion, we also must retire business models built on excess consumption. The production of garments doubled from 2000 to 2014, and the average consumer bought 60% more, but kept each piece for half as long. Yeah. And then she says, I hope you also find your humanity, your true value. We are alive at this moment. What we do now will help decide the fate of our species and most living things on Earth. Sincerely, Cameron Russell. I wonder if any of the people that she said dear, I hope she actually sent the letter to. That's what I'm saying. I hope she actually sent the letter, because if it's just in this, they're not hearing it.
No.
Okay. And then the next quote is, "Me too," said Mother Earth, by Alex Liberman, age 12, in the climate strike.
That's new.
I've seen similar signs like that. Okay. Sacred Resilience is the next one. Resistance. Yikes. Sacred Resistance is the next one. It's by Tara Hauska. And I'm not going to attempt to pronounce that.
No, there's a First Nation name, and
Yeah, it's the Chowchiching First Nation. but I don't know what that other word means, whether or not that's her name. Might be her name.
Okay.
Okay, so this is a woman who has Native American background. So we are getting a lot of diversity in this section in particular. So she talks about how homey living on the reservation is, like how it feels in the buildings there. And then she contrasts that to the corporate boardroom with its lifeless statistics and figures, the environmental coalition with its budgets and measured campaign outcomes. Here, a voice of the land is sanitized. Our mother becomes a summation of natural resources for us to consume or conserve, always at arm's length. Yeah, and that's true. We are very disconnected. As we have talked about in previous sections, we're very disconnected. And I just love her writing. Like, she's the most beautiful writer. Like, oh my gosh. She says connections become transactional or cliquish. Hierarchy is entrenched. Scarcity mentality is omnipresent, and personal growth is interwoven with westernized success as a marketer of authority. Underlying much of our movement is fundamental survival mechanism that operates on me instead of we. Money, the currency of individualism, hangs like a heavy cloud over campaigns calling for systemic change. And then she talks about Enbridge, which is the largest fossil fuel infrastructure corporation in North America, which is interesting because I've never heard of it before.
I've never heard of it either. I didn't know anything
Interesting.
about them.
So,
and the tar sands pipeline?
Yeah. So I highlighted it.
Yeah.
I'm coming for you. I'll look you up. Yeah. And she says, our steady resistance forms cracks in the world of profit margins. It transitions us away from self-destruction. We are a thorn in the side of a world that believes it must extract to exist, a bone-deep reminder there are other ways of being and people willing to take personal risk for something greater than any one individual. I have seen fear in eyes shielded behind riot gear, fear of a braided wheatgrass, and a prayer of the person who stands unarmed to protect the land. And I thought that was really just a very interesting way of looking at it. Like, here I am peacefully protesting for my planet, and you're afraid of me.
You know, the one word that popped out to me was extract. And I kept on hearing it through these essays, was that we need to stop extracting, you know, as opposed to like solar energy where you're kind of like harvesting from the sun.
Harvesting. Yeah, that's an interesting change of words.
Different. So the extract is a bad thing. Anyway.
Yeah, no, I think extract implies, one, that it's harmful to the things around it.
That are being extracted from.
Yeah, and two, that it is implying a finite resource.
Yeah.
So it's like those two, whereas harvesting is the collection of sustainable
on an ongoing
resource, on an ongoing process, and it's passive and peaceful.
Yeah.
So it is interesting, the change of language. One point, so then she talks about the local men who arrive at the blockade shouting obscenities and laughing. One points out a missing and murders Indigenous woman sign and tells a woman holding it that she might go missing if she keeps showing up here. We have been seeing a lot of that kind of stuff lately, because especially with like the most recent shooting and everything, and people feeling especially like against Native Asian American people. I think because some Indigenous people also look Asian American, they're getting thrown into that too. And then on top of that, there's been a very, very bad case of murdering of young women in Native American communities, right? Because and so it's a lot. And the fact that someone would come over and be like, you're going to be next, is just disgusting.
Yeah.
I wonder if most people truly believe we will achieve change comfortably. I liked that, because I was like, yeah, a lot of people do think that. In spaces like these, I become a frontline representative, an uncomfortable, pitiable reality alongside conceptual data presented in a familiar language with more familiar solutions. So she's frustrated that we're trying to solve the issue in a way that looks like the problem.
Just the next sentence was really interesting. The smell of sap boiling over a fire while a story is shared in a copse of maples sits just past my fingers as I slide a lawsuit across the table to a corporate banker.
Her wording is just...
It's just amazing.
If she has a book, I want to buy it. Like, I really, really enjoyed reading her work, honestly. She says, quite simply, I do not believe we will solar panel and vote our way out of this crisis without also radically reframing our connection with our mother. Mm-hmm. Can we just call Earth our mother? Mm-hmm. Like, be like, hey, Mom. Well, I'm sorry. There's human moms too. Moms, so
I don't know. Confusing.
Yeah, right. There's cat moms. Where's kitty cat?
Yeah.
Baby, there he is. Okay. Currently, we demonstrate the value of our work by the outcomes achieved. While many of us share a desire to protect our shared homelands, we often fail to consider what values we are endorsing along the way, which is another thing I thought was really interesting. It kind of reminds me of like green products or like green clothing, which is something also that Cameron in the previous section talked about, where she was like, it's a very small step to just make the clothing more sustainable without addressing that we are still endorsing increased consumption. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know, and I feel like this is on a similar line where it's like, okay, we're talking about solutions, but we're talking about it implying that we need to stay the same for our overall system.
Right.
Which inherently is not systemic, you know, so that's interesting.
Not stable, yeah.
Humility, and then she talks about in her culture, humility, recognition of fragility, and our place in the circular framework of nature, empathy, courage, respect. Those are just a few threads of the many values that are meant to guide us through the whole world of our lives. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You highlighted something else?
Oh, just something down here. The simplicity of traditional foods from a local ecosystem can feed a soul. The decision to build community and live a life of empathy, balance, and humility is a value shift badly needed.
Yeah.
Very pretty.
Go to the farmer's market. That's all I'm saying. I love the farmer's market. I'm already learning where my local, like what seasons certain vegetables grow in. Because I really didn't know that before. You know, when you go to the supermarket, it's always there, right?
Yeah, because if it's not grown here, it's probably grown in South America and they import it.
Exactly. So, like, going to a farmer's market, like, for example, unfortunately, still, the majority of my staple vegetables are not in season right now. Because I usually like to get, like, sweet peppers and spinach and can't think of any other vegetables.
Zucchini
and zucchini. That was the other one I was thinking of, zucchini.
Well, we're coming into spring right now, so that's.
I know there's so many more things available at the farmer's market now. I love it.
Yeah,
I love it.
So good.
All right, now we are on to another poem.
This is the last poem before the last article.
It's called "On the Fifth Day" and it's by Jane Hirschfield. On the fifth day, the scientists who studied the rivers were forbidden to speak or study the rivers. The scientists who studied the air were told not to speak of the air, and the ones who worked for the farmers were silenced, and the ones who worked for the bees. Someone from deep in the Badlands began posting facts. The facts were told not to speak and were taken away. The facts, surprised to be taken away, were silent. Now it was only the rivers that spoke of the rivers, and only the wind that spoke of its bees. While the unpausing factual buds of the fruit trees continued to move towards their fruit, the silence spoke loudly of silence, and the rivers kept speaking of rivers and boulders and air. In gravity, earless and tongueless, the untested rivers keep speaking. Bus drivers, shelf stockers, code writers, mechanics, accountants, lab techs, cellists keep speaking. they spoke the 5th day of silence. Do you understand that poem?
No, not quite.
No, me neither.
Well, as you read it, I was
trying again. Yeah, this is my
again.
second time reading it.
I mean, because it's like everybody who was advocating for Mother Nature was told to shut up.
Yeah, and so maybe
Right?
the only ones that are able to speak, now there's less voices, and then all these other things are like talking on top of it.
Yeah.
But the last part really confused me. They spoke the
Yes.
5th day of
Yes,
silence.
you're right.
So then that goes back to what is the 5th day? The
I
5th
don't
day in the
know.
Bible. What is the 5th day in the Bible? It's because
It's before people.
yeah,
People were formed on the 6th day.
Fish and the birds.
Probably animals.
Well, the fish and the birds came before the rest of the animals, right?
Right. But yeah.
Yeah. So on the 5th day is the fish and the birds, and talks about the rivers and the air.
That could be.
So there might be some correlation there. Do
Yeah.
bees count as birds in this context? The Bible didn't talk about insects, except for the locust, which came later. But
locust, yeah. Yeah, so something
I
bad.
feel like it has to do with something biblical, because on the 5th day just sounds biblical.
Yeah, I know. I couldn't think of any other days
Yeah.
like that where it's counting.
I was like, was the Trump administration shutting people up
I
on that
know
certain
that
day?
did occur to me too.
Because that's literally what it's
I know.
about, is them being silenced. So, anywho, all right, the man who shall not be named, according to Colbert. Okay, the last chapter, the last piece is called "Public Service for Public Health," and it is a very public service for public health sounds like quite a report, which is very appropriate because it's by Gina McCarthy, which, if you recognize that name, is oh my gosh, why am I forgetting the name of her title? Were you about to look that up?
I was going to look it up because I know she was part of the EPA.
Head of
the EPA for
she was
Obama.
the head of the EPA for Obama, and then she was distraught for Trump, but she also became the leader of the National Resource Defense Council during the Trump administration, and then during this Biden administration, she's now
the White House National Climate Advisor.
That. I think it focuses more on domestic issues, whereas the other guy, who also has a similar title, he has more international focus.
Yes,
I believe.
Yes.
So yeah, and what's cool is that she gets to be in the table for national defense discussions and stuff too, which is cool.
She's awesome.
She's awesome. She's a badass, low key. Okay. So think of this last part in the context of she's currently in the White House, which makes you feel happier. Okay. But this was written before that, so she was still very sad. Right?
Yeah, she was.
Because she talked about, this guy freaking took everything I did and just blew it up within like the first 100 days. Okay.
I wrote down here, she does not mince words.
She does not mince words at all. So the first part that I like that she said is, we used science to identify and mitigate risks of human health and natural resources through a well-defined public process. Okay, Pipe Dream Team, you go bye-bye because you're stupid.
Well, no, he just needs to do something different.
Yeah, you need to do something different.
Not for you.
Remove. Oh, I just removed one. I meant to hide. Okay, bye. What's with stupid people?
Sometimes? No.
Sorry.
No.
Sorry, you're right. But it's rude. Okay, so then came the Trump administration with its unique brand of public servants, she put it. And she talks about all the people that took power that didn't have the right qualifications.
You should say that, many of whom seem to relish the prospect of dismantling our democracy from within.
Oh, yeah, that's true. She didn't mince words.
No.
And she said that there were 100 regulations in limbo or rolled back and counting due to the Trump administration, including the Clean Power Plan, which reduces greenhouse gas emissions from power plants, the Clean Water Rule to protect rivers and streams that 1 in 3 Americans rely on for drinking water, and rules to reduce exposure to toxic chemicals in our air and in our homes that lead to premature deaths and illnesses. Yeah. So during the time of that administration, she was working in the Natural Resource Defense Council, which was her first position not having to do with government stuff. And she worked on that. She had a kid, and she continued to realize how important this issue was. And then she had grandkids, and she's like, wow, they're only going to be in their 30s when 2050 hits.
Yeah.
And she talks about how in the 1960s and 70s, due to all the different pollution problems, they reduced pollution in the United States by 70%, while GDP tripled. So that just is an example of how it's economically good to care about pollution. You could do both.
You can do both, definitely.
Responding to climate change requires a range of actions at all levels, not just a price on carbon emissions, but laws, regulations, and the right targeted incentives, technological advances, divestment from fossil fuels, and reinvention in solutions, coups by enlightened shareholders, winning litigation against fossil fuel companies, and winning elections to put climate champions in power. It requires shifting budget from dirty energy to clean, and shifting agricultural practices to improve soil health. I love that she thinks of that too. It requires phasing out fossil fuel-based fertilizers, pesticides, plastics, yes, and other synthetic chemicals that have imposed immeasurable damage on our health and ecosystems and the biodiversity that keeps our planet alive. Each one of those efforts is necessary, and success will not happen without people demanding and embracing them. We cannot be fooled into thinking there is a shortcut by which our democracy can easily fight climate change. I appreciated that she said, there's not a shortcut. It's not a spectator sport. It is time to stop focusing on what government can do and start recognizing the critical role we all play in making the government do its job. And I love that, because we see people far too concerned about what is okay for the government to do, you know? And she said, here's my plan. I'm going to communicate the stakes of this crisis and opportunities that await us if we get it right. I'm going to make sure that everyone understands the connections between climate change and health. I'm going to lift up the women who are already doing this work and those ideas, the energy, and whose ideas and energy will be essential to building the world I want for my grandchildren. I'm not going to let myself get discouraged or burnt out. Straight up.
That's her plan.
That's her plan. And so one of her main focuses is to look at climate change from a perspective of public health. Health provides a compelling reason to act and clear a way to measure and celebrate success. It personalizes climate change and opens a window to talk about the ways climate actions will make our lives better and help us move forward towards a more thriving and equitable world. Yep. And she talks about how it goes for the most vulnerable children. Climate change does, because heat stress and air pollution can lead to premature labor and increase risk of low birth weight. Zika can pass from mother to fetus, causing birth defects. Children inhale pollution in proportion to their body weight, which can have permanent effects on their development. If you're a parent or child that uses an inhaler, you get it. 4 million children worldwide develop asthma each year simply because they have the misfortune of living near a major roadway. I wonder if that's why Brian and I don't, you know?
Yeah.
Because we lived in the mountains, so we didn't have that problem. Yeah.
I never knew it was so connected. I
don't think people knew back then.
No, I don't think they knew either, because some people said, well, maybe it's allergies. Asthma is related to allergies, you know?
Right.
So,
well, now I'm wondering if allergies relate to asthma, because we do have so many friends who have had allergies and seasonal allergies, and like my brother and I didn't, but like we would always have like allergy medication for all of our friends, and they all lived in downtown areas.
Yeah.
But they still, the roads around them were not that busy, but I don't know.
I have no idea.
Climate change is the most significant public health challenge in our world today. And we need to frame it as such. And don't worry, that will be a video. Don't you even worry. And she says women will be the ones to make it a reality. Which men, you're good to do that as well. You've been in power. You can do that too. And then she talks about Rachel Carson, Silent Spring, and I heart Rachel Carson because she's bae. I still think Rachel Carson would be very disappointed with where we're at. And then she talks about other influential women in the climate, just who are doing a good job, like Mary Robinson, who was the former president of Ireland, who became, quote, an angry granny for climate justice, which I love.
Yeah.
Why isn't that a thing? I've seen science moms. I haven't seen
angry grannies.
Well, actually, that's not true. I have seen that. Because but it was a Eugene thing, Eugene, Oregon, and they're an interesting brand of people. They're amazing. But there was a bunch of grandparent age people who were like leading a skit and a song and stuff, supporting climate change movement and stuff. I'm trying to remember. I think it was in the environmental law conference or something like that. That's when it took place. It was Raging Grannies or something. I can't remember what it's called, but it was like that. I was like, oh, wow. She says that the federal government has never acted without a strong push from strong women. You can be one of them, which is interesting because it's the first time this book has specifically suggested that this book was meant for women.
Yeah.
That's what I got from that quote.
She's very outright.
My advice is to attend a local town meeting, hearing, or event, just as I did when I got my start as a health agent in my hometown of Clayton, Massachusetts. So basically, you're going to hear parents saying, hey, my kids have asthma, like there's all these problems happening, the water's not up to par, all that kind of stuff. And that will give you a good idea on where to start. More than 440 cities across the country are committed to upholding the Paris Climate Agreement. Along with 25 states that are home to 55% of the U.S. population, where if joined together, they would make the third largest economy in the world.
Amazing.
Let's continue.
Let's do it.
I think there's been a couple more since this book.
I'm sure.
Don't let your energy bounce around on Twitter and Instagram. Well, now she just sounds like an old lady. But it's true. Yeah, you can't just be a keyboard hero? I think that's the term.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. And
instead, what are you supposed to do?
And instead, take it outside into your community and let it loose. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I guess I will read the last paragraph to finish this off.
Okay.
Climate change is not a faraway problem that no one can fix. We have many solutions already, and innovation can help us get where we need to go faster. Will these solutions fix everything? No. But will they move us forward? Yes. And as solutions grow, they will generate broader engagement. People will see the change and recognize that a low carbon future is actually good for us. We should want it and we should run towards it like our children's lives depend on it, because they do. Yay! We finished the persist chapter. And I would like to add on to her paragraph at the end and just say that if we don't go forward, we go backwards. There's no stagnation.
Yeah.
So that's another thing. Will it fix everything? No. But it's moving forward. And if you're not moving forward, you're moving backwards, for clarification. There's no comfort zone anymore, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So the next section is called Feel. And it starts with a pretty picture. See, pretty picture. And it says, what is the environment except my body and your body and the breath between us? Don't breathe that close. There's a pandemic.
I was gonna say, and the food we eat.
And the food we eat and everything else. And each section has a little thing dedicated to it in the intro. So let me read that. Feel. Awake, aware, attuned. hearts break, souls shake with anxiety. Can't skip this. Struggling, mourning, raging, healing, a ferocious love for the planet we call home. So I feel like this section is going to talk a lot about climate-induced anxiety and that kind of thing, and not getting burned out, which is good because I could use that. Because if y'all didn't notice, I didn't post a video this week. It just didn't happen. To be honest, I just had a lot of I have a full-time job, and the full-time job took over, honestly.
That happens.
That happens. And so the flooding video will come out next Tuesday. I apologize about that. So look for that. And yeah, join us on Tuesday, and then next Thursday for
The next section.
For the next section. And then on Friday, probably, because then I'll do a climate recap as I do for each month. So you'll get a March climate recap. All right. Remember to talk about the climate every single day and to support your local news organizations. And go to your town meetings and stuff, because if we want it to be community-based, we need to start acting like a community again. Yeah. So, Mom, you need to do that too.
I do.
Get on it.
I will.
Okay, great. All right. Have a great rest of your evening. Yep, we're doing that again.